Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Ringo TV Reactions. I'm your host, Ringo, back again with another video. What we're going to be talking about is what jury of your peers really mean. A lot of people have been outraged over the Carmelo Anthony verdict, and they've been complaining that Carmelo didn't have a jury of his peers. So what I want to do in this particular video is I want to explain what jury of your peers mean, because for some odd reason in the Black community, they don't understand the legal process. They don't understand certain phrases. They just don't get it. Now, I agree that Carmelo getting 35 years is a just verdict. I mean, he should have got life in prison for murder. A lot of people seem to be upset about that, and they believe that he was railroaded. And my response to this is that I think that most Black Americans, they don't understand the legal process. That the legal process is a system, and if you don't know how to play the game, then you lose. For some reason, when Black people hear jury of your peers, they think a jury of Black people. That's not what jury of your peers mean. So now, what inspired this particular video is somebody had came in my comment section under my recent video live stream that I did, titled "There Are No Black Jurors on Carmelo Anthony Trial. Here's Why." And I was explaining why. And someone came into the comment section, and basically said the following. They said, "Wow, Rittenhouse and Zimmerman got off. You are so wrong on this. That juror is not a jury of his peers. Also, those boys were bullies." This is the typical argument that you hear on social media. They keep saying that Metcalf was a bully when there are no facts to substantiate those claims. This is just hearsay and gossip that people get from social media. And because most people are emotionally ruled, they don't understand the legal process. So what I want to do is I want to explain jury of his peers. That's what I want to talk about in this particular video here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch gears and, get that information up on the screen in a minute for you guys. Well, I'll just read it. I'll do that. Right. So let me take this off and get back on camera. So now what I did is I went into ChatGPT and asked a simple question. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to break everything down for you guys so that you can know exactly what jury of your peers mean, so that we don't have any ignorance or people making statements that sound crazy. Because again, jury of your peers does not mean having a jury of Black and white people to make you feel comfortable. Even though that may make you feel comfortable, that does not mean that they're going to agree with you. Do you understand that? When you're on trial and you have a jury, just because they're Black does not mean they're going to favor you. But for some reason, the community believed that because there was no Black jurors, that's why he got 35 years. And that's not so, guys. So I asked ChatGPT the following. I said, first, I already know the answer. At the same time, I need a detailed answer for a YouTube video to explain this to Black people who don't understand. Here's my question. If I'm a Black man on trial for murder, what does it mean to have a jury of my peers? Please explain in clear detail, because many Black people believe that because there are no Black jurors on the Carmelo Anthony trial, that it mean he didn't have jurors of his peers, and that's the reason he was found guilty. They lack the understanding of the legal process. That's what I asked ChatGPT. So it responds back and it says, I'll break this down in a way you can use, I guess, on video, what jury of your peers really mean legally. It says what it does mean and how to explain the Carmelo Anthony juror issue without misleading people. Because, a lot of times when people do content, they mislead people with false information, misinformation, because they just don't understand, again, the legal process. So it says, absolutely. And you're right that a lot of people misunderstand this phrase. For a YouTube video, I would explain it like this. What jury of my peers really means. When people hear jury of my peers, they often think it means if I'm a black man, I'm supposed to have black people on my jury. That is the mentality of how people that side with Carmelo believe. They believe that jury of my peers mean I'm supposed to have a group of black people that's on the jury board so that they can pretty much judge me. In other words, if there's white people, I can't trust them because they're white. That's their mentality. Their mentality is if they see anybody that's white, that I can't trust them because they're not a jury of my peers. And that's so wrong legally. It makes no sense. So now it says, but legally, that is not what it means. A jury of your peers means you have the right to be judged by ordinary members of the community, not by the government alone, not by police, not by prosecutors, not by the judge by himself, and not by some special class of people picked to convict you. Do you see that? Because a lot of times we think, oh, this juror was picked to convict you. So if you see an all-white jury, oh, they were picked to convict me because I'm black. That's the mentality. The Constitution protects the right to an impartial jury from the state and district where the alleged crime happened. The jury pool is supposed to be drawn from a fair cross-section of the community, but the final 12 jurors do not have to match the defendant's race, age, gender, religion, income level, or life background. Do you understand? So let's say, for example, hypothetically speaking, you're gay. It doesn't mean that the jurors have to be gay in order for them to judge you. It means that they're impartial. It means that they're going to give you a fair shake based on the facts. They're not going to side with you because you're black. They're not going to side with you because you're white. No, they're going to look at the facts. Now, it goes on and it says, so if a black man is on trial, jury of his peers does not legally mean he must have black jurors. Do you understand? Please stop saying that Carmelo did not have a jury of his peers because you don't see a black person on the jury board. When you say stuff like that, you're showing yourself to be uneducated when it comes to this entire point. Because in your mind, you believe that he have to have black people up there in order to be judged. So let me get this straight. So if you have a white judge proceeding the case, I guess you're finished because he's not a judge of your peers now. You need a black judge in order to feel comfortable. That don't make no sense, guys. So again, it goes on and it says, so if a black man is on trial, jury of his peers does not legally mean he have to have black jurors. It means he must have legally qualified citizens from the community selected through a fair process who can listen to the evidence and decide the case impartially. Do you understand? So it goes on and it says that distinction matters. The jury pool versus the final jury. This is where people get confused. There are two different things. The jury pool, also called the veneer. That is the larger group of citizens summoned for jury duty. I talked about this in my video about those of you that have been called in for jury duty. And when they call you in, you go through a process where they ask you questions. A lot of these questions are really designed to wean out people that are partial in judgment. And because most black folk don't understand the legal process, when these questions are given to them, you disqualify yourself. So let's just say, hypothetically speaking, you're a black person who was called in for the Carmelo Anthony case, and you already made up your mind that you're going to rock with Carmelo regardless. And they ask you a certain question. Well, what do you think about law enforcement? Do you like police? And you was like, well, I don't like cops. I'm not too fond of them. You'd already disqualified yourself. Even though you came up there with the intent to side with Carmelo, which means that you are partial in judgment, those questions were designed to capture you and get you off the case because they knew you weren't going to be fair anyway. If they ask you a question of, what do you think about homosexuality? Because it's in regards to a case where a gay man killed his lover. And you already came up there with the mindset to convict the person on murder just because they're gay. You already had that in your heart. So as soon as they ask you the question of, what do you think about gay people or homosexuality? And you says, well, I don't agree with that lifestyle because the Bible says this and the Bible says that. Disqualified. You got to go. They already know not to put you on the trial because your mind is already made up. You're not looking at the facts. Do you understand that? So it goes on and says the jury pool, also called the veneer. That is the larger group of citizens summoned for jury duty. This group is supposed to come from a fair cross-section of the community. That means the system cannot intentionally or systematically exclude black people, women, Hispanic people, or another distinct group from even being called for jury service. The Supreme Court has recognized that the jury pool must be broadly representative of the community. So that being said, when the process came to select jurors, they already selected a group from different communities in terms of different races of people, if you want to call it that. Blacks, Hispanics, this, that. They already did all of this stuff, right? But what it comes down to is when they go through that interview and questioning process, right? So it says, 2, the final jury. That is the group that actually hears the case. See, a lot of people are not trying to hear the case because you already have it in your mind. You're already prejudged. A lot of people from the black community that was brought on to be jurors, they weren't listening to the case. They already had their mind made up that they were going to rock with Carmelo, right? Excuse me. So it goes on and it says that the final jury, that is the group that actually hears the case. The final jury does not have to be a perfect racial mirror of the community. A defendant has a right to a fair process, not a guaranteed racial lineup. So a trial can legally have no black jurors if the process that produced that jury was lawful. But a trial may have constitutional problems if black jurors were intentionally excluded because they were black. Now, if black folk have an issue with the juror selection in terms of there was no black jurors, you would have to prove legally that black people were excluded from being jurors, if that's how you feel. In this case, they were not excluded. They were interviewed. You understand? And because they were interviewed, they weren't answering the questions, and they actually removed themselves. Give me a minute. Right? They actually removed themselves due to questioning. So it says, so a trial can legally have no black jurors if the process that produced that jury was lawful. But a trial may have constitutional problems if black jurors were intentionally excluded because they were black, or if the jury selection system systematically kept black people out of the jury pool. That is the key difference. No black jurors does not automatically mean an illegal jury. Are you trying to learn? Because I believe that most black Americans that have sided with Karmelo do not understand the legal process, and they don't understand what jury of your peers mean. A jury with no black jurors may look bad. It may raise questions. It may make people uncomfortable. It may make the community suspicious, but legally, the question is not simply where were there black jurors. The legal question is, were black people unlawfully excluded from the jury selection process? And when you look at the Karmelo case, black people were included in the process. They eliminated themselves due to the question. If you go back to the news reports and you listen to all the details, you had black folk that were questioned to be jurors. And they was like, look, I can't see myself putting away another black man. Well, you're going to exclude yourself because you're partial in judgment. So if black folk really understood the game, if they understood the legal process, you answer all of those questions wrong. You didn't play the game. So if you really wanted to be on that juror stand, if you really wanted to be there to support Karmelo, the questions that they asked you pushed you out of it. You did that to yourself because you're partial in judgment. They want impartial jurors who are going to look at the case for what it is, right? So it says the legal question is, were black people unlawfully excluded from the jury selection process? Those are not the same thing. For example, if black citizens were in the jury pool, answered questions during jury selection, and were removed for race neutral reasons, the final jury may still be legal. Do you see that? But if the prosecutors used their jury strikes to remove black jurors because of race, that is a serious constitutional issue. That is where Basson versus Kentucky comes in. The Supreme Court ruled that prosecutors cannot use peremptory strikes to exclude potential jurors because of race. So the honest explanation is, no black jurors does not automatically prove racism. But if black jurors were removed because they were black, that is a legal problem. So to anyone that have an issue with the fact that there was no black jurors, you just can't conclude racism. You would have to prove that black folks were excluded because of race. That is what you would have to prove. And based on the Karmelo case, you had many black folk that were chosen to be on the jury selection. And because of the questioning, they excluded themselves because they came in there with the mindset thinking that because they rock with Karmelo, they could be partial in judgment and still make it to the jury stand. That's not how it worked. That's why they have these questions, so they could capture all of the partial judgment people and exclude them. And I'm pretty sure there was white people that came up there that may wanted to side with Karmelo, and they were excluded too. All right. So it says, so the honest explanation, no black jurors does not automatically prove racism. But if black jurors were removed because they were black, that is a legal problem. What is Batson challenge? During jury selection, both sides can remove some potential jurors. Some people are removed for cause, meaning there is a clear reason. For example, they admit they cannot be fair. They know the defendant, they know the victim, they already made up their mind, or they have a conflict. Do you see that? Because that becomes a conflict of interest in a trial. If I already made up my mind that I don't like gay people and is a gay man on trial and he wants a fair trial, how can I have a fair trial if the jurors already are partial in judgment? How can this gay guy have a fair trial if 7 of the jurors already in their mind don't like gay people, condemn gay people? They're already partial in judgment. So they're not going to listen to the case. And what we're trying to do is make people understand that in order to have a fair trial, you need to have an impartial juror selection. And that's why they ask questions. And I think that the Black community need to educate themselves on what jury of your peers mean, because it don't mean having jurors that are Black, right? So it goes on and it says, some people are removed for cause, meaning there is a clear reason. For example, they admit they cannot be fair. People during the Karmelo case, when they were selected for jury duty, they literally said they cannot be fair. They're going to side with Karmelo regardless. So they were removed and they were Black, right? Another one is they know the defendant. If you know Karmelo, you're not going to be on jury, right? They know the victim. If somebody know Metcalf, they cannot be on that stand. They already made up their mind. If a person already made up their mind to rock with Karmelo, they're not going to be on the jury pool. Or they have a conflict. Both sides may also get a limited number of, I keep having issues with this particular word, but let me read it out. Give me a minute.
Peremptory.
Okay. Both sides may also both sides may also get a limited number of peremptory strikes where they do not normally have to give a reason. But there is a limit. They cannot use those strikes in a racially discriminatory way. A Batson challenge happens when one side says the other side is striking jurors because of race. If the judge finds that race was the real reason, that can create a major issue and may lead to remedies, including possibly a new trial, depending on the situations. Cornell's Legal Information Institute describes a Batson challenge as an objection that a peremptory strikes was used to exclude a juror based on race, ethnicity, or sex. Applying that to the Carmelo Anthony case, in the Carmelo Anthony case, reports said he was a Black defendant. Austin Metcalf was white, and the trial began with no Black jurors on the panel. A Collin County jury convicted Anthony of murder and sentenced him to 35 years in prison in June 2026. Report says his defense argued self-defense, but the jury rejected that argument. Now, again, why did the jury reject that argument? Because they're impartial. They're looking at the actual facts the same way I looked at the facts from the beginning. Before they even went to trial, I already told you guys the verdict. Before they even went to trial with Karmelo, I already told you guys what the verdict going to be. I told you Carmelo's going to prison. Why? Because I'm not partial in judgment. I'm impartial. I looked at the case. I looked at the facts, the evidence, and I already weighed it, and I said there's no self-defense in this case. He's going to prison. Right? So it goes on and says, so when people say he did not have a jury of his peers because there were no Black jurors, that statement is emotionally understandable, but legally incomplete. In other words, we understand how you feel, but legally, it's incomplete. That's not what jury of your peers mean. Doesn't mean that you have to have Black people up there. I could be on trial for murder and it's just nothing but white jurors and I get acquitted. Why? Because those folks weighed the case and looked at the facts. Just because you see a group of white people on the jury does not mean, oh, I'm done. You know? So it goes on and says that statement is emotionally understandable, but legally incomplete. The stronger and more accurate question would be, were black potential jurors available in the jury pool? And if so, why were they removed? That's the question. So if there were black people that were selected, why were they removed? And I can guarantee you they were removed during the questioning process when they made statements that showed that they were partial in judgment, and they were removed. Again, because you don't know the legal process, you don't understand the game, you don't understand nothing. Now, you have people that know how to play the game. You have people that are partial in judgment, and when they ask certain questions, they play dumb and they get on the jury pool. They get on the jury pool. And keep in mind, they're partial in judgment. They just understand how to play the game. Again, if you don't know this stuff, you'll always fail every single time. And I'm not suggesting that when it comes to a trial, if you're partial in judgment, the way to get on the jury pool is to manipulate the system, because eventually they're going to catch you. Eventually, they're going to catch you, and they're going to know that you're partial in judgment. We've seen situations like this happen in cases where certain jurors were removed because they knew that that person slipped through the cracks. So it goes on and says the stronger and more accurate question would be, were black potential jurors available in the jury pool? And if so, why were they removed? That is the question that matters, not just why was the final jury black enough, but was the selection process fair, lawful, and free from racial discrimination? A simple way to explain to your audience. Let me see what we got. A jury of your peers does not mean a black defendant is guaranteed black jurors. It means he is entitled to a jury selected from ordinary citizens in the community through a fair process. The Constitution requires an impartial jury and a jury pool that represents a fair cross-section of the community, but it does not guarantee that the final 12 jurors will look like the defendant. See, what the black community is expecting is that when Carmelo have jurors, that they look like him, that they're black, to make you feel comfortable. That's not what jury of your peers mean. It goes on and it says, now, if black jurors were intentionally removed because they were black, that is a different conversation. That would be a Batson issue. That would be a legal issue. But the fact that the final jury had no black jurors by itself does not automatically mean the trial was illegal or that he was convicted only because of race. What we're trying to do is educate you on the legal process of jury selection. Why people misunderstand this. Many people are using the phrase jury of your peers like it means racial representation, but the law uses it more like civic equality, meaning you are judged by fellow citizens, not rulers, kings, police officers, politicians, or government officials acting alone. That right is about protecting the accused from government power. It is not a promise that the jury will share your race. Now, from a community trust standpoint, racial diversity on a jury can matter. People naturally feel more comfortable when the jury looks like the community. And in a racially sensitive case, a non-black jury judging a black defendant may cause public concern. That concern is real, meaning the concerns that you may have may be real. It may feel a certain way, but legally, concern and emotional concern are not always the same thing. Some can look unfair to the public, but still be legal. Something can be legal, but still raise serious questions. And something can be illegal only if there is evidence that the jury selection process violates the Constitution. So these are the type of things that people would have to be focusing on. What was this jury selection like? Because if you can't prove that, you're just saying things that is not true, right? So it goes on and it says, a jury of your peers means a jury of fellow citizens from the community, selected through a fair and impartial legal process. It does not mean the defendant is guaranteed jurors of the same race. If a black man is on trial, the law does not require that black jurors to be seated. But the law does forbid the system, the prosecutors, or the court from excluding black people because they are black. And in the Karmelo case, black people were not excluded because they're black. If that was the case, it'll be headline news all over the place. You'll have jurors coming out all over the place saying, I was excluded because I was black. You'll have potentials literally going to social media saying, I was excluded because I was black. They were unfair. Nobody's doing that. It goes on and says, so the real issue is not simply whether Carmelo Anthony had black jurors. The real issue is whether black jurors were unfairly excluded. If they were, that is a serious problem. If they were not, then saying he did not have a jury of his peers is not legally accurate. Do you understand? So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've explained jury of your peers. I believe that we were very clear, accurate, legally for you to understand. So when you watch content creators and people speaking in regard to the Carmelo verdict, and they're saying he did not have a jury of his peers, that makes no sense. Because jury of your peers does not mean having black faces on a jury board. So rate, comment, and subscribe, guys. I'll catch you in the next stream. It is what it is. Make sure you let me know what you think about the video. Let me know what you think. Post it in the comments. Thumb up the video. Hype the video. We'll catch you in the next one. I'm out of here. Peace and blessings. We out. Peace.
If you like our content, consider supporting via Cash App at $RingoTV Raw. Become a patron on patreon.com for exclusive video content not shown on YouTube. You could also support through PayPal at paypal.me/RingoTVRaw. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell to be notified of new content. Follow me on Instagram at RingoTVRaw.
This is Ringo TV Reactions, the only channel on YouTube bringing you the truth 100% raw and uncut. I'm out.